Blog Talk Radio.
Namaste, people of planet Earth and consciousness. Welcome to Nature of Reality Radio. It is September 17th, 2014. This is your host, Andrew Fisher, broadcasting every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to expose the true and false nature of reality for what it is and what it isn't. Today we are going to have a crop circle special. Suzanne Taylor, one of the foremost experts in the world, arguably, on the crop circle phenomenon, just finished watching her documentary, What on Earth Inside the Crop Circle Mystery. And I also did watch Crop Circle's Quest for Truth, which, the latter of which, by the way, is on the UFO TV Studios YouTube channel. I believe this is her in the on the queue, area code 310. If that is you, Suzanne Taylor, I will get you on the air after I finish the news, courtesy of Alex Jones and Company at InfoWars. Well, first of all, let me start off by saying that I look forward to seeing Ron Paul and other liberty lovers at the Liberty Political Action Conference in Alexandria, Virginia, which I will be going to tomorrow and staying till Saturday. I wonder what would happen if I asked Ron Paul, are you aware of the fact that you should be our president right now, but the only reason you aren't is because you lost the Republican primary because of massive voter fraud, and you would have won had that voter fraud not happened, and you definitely would have kicked Obama's ass had you been on the presidential ballot? Does that seriously not disturb you? Well, will I do that? Remains to be seen. But Ron Paul, if anything, would probably say no comment, even though what I just said is true. He should be our president, but voter fraud kept him from it. Well, let's make the most of this Liberty Political Action Conference, and I'll do whatever I can to make the most of it. So for now, the news. Bloomberg receives French award for supporting the ideals of liberty. The elites reward one another for a job well done. Mayor Bloomberg does not care about the ideals of liberty at all, and he gets some sort of a French award for it. He is the most nanny state and police state loving mayor ever. He was the mayor of New York, yes, and all those stupid, silly laws just to put people in a state of fear and helplessness. Well, first of all, New York has some of the strictest gun laws in the country, and the whole soda bottle thing where soda bottles can't be over a certain size and all designed to, well, first of all, it's not law, it's what is considered to be public policy. There is a difference between what is law and what is considered to be public policy. And all that stuff that Bloomberg did, it's considered to be public policy, but they'll treat it as law because they're tyrants. I was, of course, in New York for 9/11 anniversary this past Thursday. Yeah, it was Thursday. And you have the right to use bullhorns at rallies, but in New York, if you use it, you will get arrested. Just ask Alex Jones. Our next article, pocket-sized surveillance drone can fly through windows. UAV could end up in the hands of law enforcement. Yes, could we please act like we understand that this is an illegal search that you would be doing with these drones, these pocket-sized drones? The Big Brother surveillance system, which the drones are part of, is designed to tyrannize people, not keep you safe. It is designed to keep you in a state of helplessness and fear because people behave differently when they're being spied on all the time. It's about blackmailing people who oppose the government, and it's about predicting future trends to engage in illegal trading on the stock market. And these drones, well, even though they're not really part of that, they're just to surveil people to keep people in a state of fear and helplessness under the guise of fighting terrorism. So let's oppose this. Next article, pro-amnesty Marriott CEO asks guests to start tipping maids. The CEO is likely to expect customers to pay for immigrant workers, that would be illegal immigrant workers, I presume, if amnesty is passed. Yes, well, what's wrong with tipping maids? Don't they deserve to get tipped? Yes, well, in the end, you should not ask people to tip. It's really a courtesy thing to not ask, just like it's a courtesy thing to tip. So if they decide not to tip you, get used to it, but still one should feel an obligation to do it. But when the CEO starts asking people to do it, especially when it's for illegal immigrant workers, then we got a problem. Our next article, HHS, Human Health Services, I believe that stands for Human Health Services, readies U.S. hospitals for Ebola. The state's kept in the dark about the severity of the often fatal disease. Yes, it's going like wildfire in Africa, and the United States government is going to Africa to exploit Africa's resources under the guise of fighting Ebola. So let's act like we understand that. It reminds me of Coney 2012 when they were going to Africa to exploit the resources under the guise of fighting a bogus boogeyman who hadn't been seen at that time for 5.5 years. So is the Ebola, which is concerned to be airborne, now going to get to the United States and sicken a lot of people? Well, let's hope not. Guardian angels, spirit guides, and source, please do not let that happen. Next article, man humiliated by the TSA after the Cologne sets off bomb detector. Federal agency apprehends traveler for wearing Chanel blue. Okay, the Cologne set off the bomb detector. TSA is not about safety, it's about control and taking away your dignity and humiliating you and making you feel like you deserve to be a slave. The fact that 9/11 was an inside job is the confirmation that you need that the TSA is not about safety. Need I say more? All right, next article. New recruits flock to ISIS following Obama's speech. The U.S. airstrikes will only embolden support for terrorists, say those among local populations in Syria. U.S. government publicly runs Al-Qaeda, which is also called ISIS. They just changed the name because people are realizing the U.S. government and British intelligence and Saudi intelligence and the governments of Qatar, the Mossad, Egypt and Turkey, yeah, they're the big boys when it comes to controlling ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And they want to take over the Middle East, so and now they're getting new recruits to flock to ISIS after the speech. Well, you'd have to ask the recruits why they decide to go to ISIS, but we don't need more people joining ISIS. All right, only 2 more articles before I get Suzanne on. Dozens of children dead after UN gives tainted vaccine in rebel-held Syria. The U.S. and Saudi-backed mercenaries blame al-Assad, the dictator of Syria. Well, of course, if it's a vaccine, it's going to be tainted. Listen to my interview with Leslie Manoukian, which I did several months ago, and you'll learn all about that. And this is the children that are getting poisoned by the UN. Well, the UN is not about world peace. That was a big lie after World War II. The UN is to make sure World War II doesn't happen. No, it's just supposed to be the de facto global headquarters of the global government that the power elites want. That's what it's really for. So don't trust them giving vaccines. All right, one more article here. The top U.S. military official admits our Arab allies are funding ISIS. I know major Arab allies who fund them, he says. Yeah, need I say more? U.S. government publicly runs Al-Qaeda, and their allies are funding ISIS. Connect the dots, you will see that the U.S. military and the U.S. government control ISIS. So, without further ado, I believe this is Suzanne Taylor.
What a cheery introduction.
Oh, how you doing? Yes, I know I might consider that fear-mongering, but hey, if you can last through the first 5 to 10 minutes of my show, then I think you can overcome your fears. And I've always told people, listen to Alex Jones to overcome your fears. It worked for me. It should work for you. So
we need to take people into a sweet place now.
Okay, but from now on, for the rest of the show, we are here to discuss the who, what, when, where, why, and how of crop circles. I guess we'll take that question by question. But I guess we should start off, because you wanted me to change the video description to make reference to this. You wanted to talk about how some of your experiences with TED and how they have marginalized what is outside of scientific materialism. So I guess we'll start with that. I did look up to see what TED stands for, but I don't remember what it does stand for, so make sure you tell us that as well. So tell us about that subject.
Well, it stands for something that actually it doesn't really stand on now. I think that was an old name, and then it's evolved a lot since then. But it does, for the record, it stands for Technology, Entertainment, and Design. But in fact, science is, maybe they equate that with technology, but a lot of their purview is science, and what they're doing is in a couple of different forms, they're delivering short speeches that are, as their motto says, ideas worth spreading. So that's your little nutshell of what TED is, and people who hang out online can't escape the fact that a lot of these talks circulate a lot online, and they have millions of views to the ones that have gotten themselves popular. And it's a considered to be, I think, generally speaking, a very high-minded format, a platform in a world that needs high-minded things. We need to be able to look up to things and to look for guidance to intelligent things. But as your introduction sort of set the groundwork, lots of feet of clay out there, and what we would like to be intelligent, like our government. Well, Ted has some feet of clay as well. And, in fact, sort of the overarching purpose, you might say, of dealing with what Ted is doing that's not so good is really to make them into the better enterprise that we would like them to be. We would like to have our heroes be heroic. And it's helpful to us, to have good models. And Ted has a little catch-up to do to make up for some of its transgressions, which have been widely circulated online. Again, if you're really paying attention to that arena, it's not a kind of little tiny invisible thing. It made a huge amount of noise online when it was at its most noisy or noisiest. It was, I think, the most responded to story, situation online ever that had to do with science. Thousands of communications were received in threads and comments and what have you. So I realize I can keep talking. That's sort of the basic. And then we would, go into what in the world did they do that gets me so riled. So do we want to? Is this where we want to go?
Sure, go right ahead.
You know what I would say, to tie this into the crop circle, since that was really the billing and how this all started, my background actually is in producing events and projects that have to do with consciousness, one way or another, have to do with the relatively limited way we're thinking, and this time in history when there's so much information and inspiration to think in a bigger, more holistic way. The crop circles came along in my world. It's just another subject matter that could make people think again. I mean, we really do have to rethink. Just listening to you at the beginning of the program with those things bulleted one after another, it's like, oh, my gosh, you can barely breathe, thinking, what in the world are we going to do about this contracted world that's off base, that's not here for the good of all? And that's always been my interest, what to do about it. I see this world has hit some walls, and where to from here? And so I've produced many different kinds of things that make people think again. And some years ago, these crop circles, many years ago actually, I made, as you said, I made this wonderful movie, but I made that because I got so intrigued by what was going on and thought, wow, the world is misinformed about this. And how do you inform the world about anything? You make movies. And so that was the impetus for me becoming a movie maker. I was very familiar with the world of movies because I'd been an actress and I was married to a producer, so it wasn't like foreign territory for me. But having done that, having made this movie, having given my all to opening people's minds to a body of evidence that indicates we're not alone. We don't know where the other is. We can't define it or pinpoint it, but we can see by the messages it sends us, by the way it deals with us, by the way it engages with us, that we're dealing with another intelligence. And as far-fetched as that may sound to anybody who doesn't know anything, if you look at the evidence, you see that it's much more likely that we are being visited by something than that people are responsible for this phenomenon. Strange but true. Evidence is evidence. So with my world having been heavily consumed by the circles for some time, and there being really nothing much new coming out of that world, I mean, I've been working with this movie for a couple of years now, getting it seen, getting it out, speaking for the power of what it is presenting. Well, there wasn't anything much new to say, and I thought, okay, I've got to have another platform now. What's my next platform for really the same mission, which is to get us wised up? to consciousness, to a much to a worldview that goes beyond the scientific materialism that we're in the grips of now, that makes us so greedy and self-centered and hurtful to one another, and to get us into the next kind of evolution, in human perception, which is that we're in it together. It's a world of mutuality. We've got to cooperate, and that's not pie in the sky. Although I guess you think it is, but it's necessary. I mean, if we don't move in that direction, predictions are conceivably dire for what will happen to the human species. So I pay attention to these things and I care about these things. So in looking for a next platform, there was TED. It already was very well branded as a high-minded, eclectic kind of place where ideas worth spreading are their stock in trade. Well, what am I dealing with, So I applied for a license to produce one of their subsidiary programs, and after years of just having one central organization with a radically expensive conference that they produced each year. I think it's more than $8,000 now, and they accept a couple thousand people. You have to apply because they're oversubscribed. It's quite something. So you want them to be good, if they're going to spread ideas worth spreading, and they're going to stand for something so expensive, which makes it seem important. They should really be ideas that are worth spreading. Well, we could talk the rest of your program about what they did, but essentially they pulled in their parameters early in 2013, and they seemed to come under the influence of the rather organized skeptic force. I say skeptic with a capital S. It's very good to be skeptical. We all should be skeptical. Don't swallow any, phony stories. But being skeptical as a point of view where you refuse to entertain the possibility of things outside this little narrow, objective, scientific, materialist point of view, fundamentalist point of view, well, that's not okay. So all of a sudden, TED became not the purveyor of all the most wonderful ideas that are worth spreading, but many of which are outside traditional forms of these objective science. Consciousness is outside that. Everything related to psi, everything related to this unseen force that really is the kind of soup which is our unity, that we're all swimming in that same soup. Well, TED would have none of that. And then they did some very abusive things in acting out on this particular policy that they first, shifted over to. I was early on in producing the event I had applied for my license for. I'd gotten my license. It was called, fancifully we called it, Brother, Can You Spare a Paradigm, after that old World War II song, Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? I like to do things with a little wink in the eye. And then Making the Quantum Leap was the subtitle, and it was all about how we need to think bigger. And so early on, as I was putting it together, which I had a year to do, and you do it as a volunteer. You can't make money at it. If you produce a program that takes in more than, by tickets and by sponsorship, more than you spend, you have to roll it over into a next program or into charity, or you can't put it in your pocket. You're not in this to make money. You're in this as a volunteer. It is a huge effort, but I have a little nonprofit, and that's what I do. I make huge efforts to try to help the world. We were all working, those of us who had these licenses, and there's, I don't know the count now, but there may be 500 TEDx programs. They call them TEDx. They're little mini TEDs, and they go on all over the world, and everybody who does one has to apply for a license, and, they see your credentials. They see that you're reputable. They wouldn't take any Tom, Dick, or Harry. They have to see that you have substance, because this is a very prestigious platform, and they don't want to hurt it, which rightfully so. We were operating with a 160-page manual, all of us producers. That's the standard thing. They're careful. They don't want you outside their lines, but that's fine if their lines are good. So I was moving right along, getting my program produced, and then all of a sudden, early in or in the spring of 2014, all the producers got a new directive. And the new directive was a cautionary one. Watch out. There are programs some of you are entertaining or doing or going to do. We will not allow these anymore. And it was a very dicey communication. I mean, where is the line between what's real, what's not real, what is visionary and commendable, and what is woo-woo, you know? Well, we don't want woo-woo with TED. I think actually that's what kicked them into this reconsideration. That they did. There was a program in Spain at the end of 2012 that they probably weren't paying that close attention. Once they gave a license, they kind of let their producers, I guess, be somewhat free. But as I looked at their program, I thought, oh, that didn't look good. Yeah, rightfully so. They should get a little concerned about that. But then they went too far in their concern, and they were under the influence, we discovered, of this professional or organized skeptic force that really does spend its energy undermining things that have this kind of next level of information that's not quite objective science, and they labeled it all pseudoscience. Well, no. We have, in the world of parapsychology, in the world of psi, there's real scientific exploration going on with very serious scientific protocols. It's different from materialist science, different from things you put under a microscope. You can't put consciousness under a microscope. But that doesn't mean you can't study it and you can't do it as a serious scientific investigator. So as I say, it was a very blurry line, and all of us producers were a little confused about where the line was. But in the meantime, I'm grandfathered. My program's underway. I've got my people all invited, and they all did pass muster as people with scientific credentials, serious credentials, who were working a little bit imaginatively, a little bit outside that narrower box. But I thought we were fine because I had my license. I was complying with their 160-page manual, which is the only way you lose your license if you don't comply with all their rules. I was complying with all their rules. And then, I guess concurrent to sending that communication around that warned us all, they also removed 2 talks that were very well regarded and popular from their database, and that's what started this incredible kickback of the intelligentsia of the world, who, as the several thousand communications came in to TED, which opened a track for comments, they were virtually all angry at TED. And you could tell that, occasionally a skeptic would duck in there and say, usually they're nasty. You can sort of tell their tone. It's like the hoaxers in the crop circle world. They're so nasty. I mean, you can almost read who you don't want to pay attention to by the tone that they use, and name-calling and ridiculing and what have you. But most of the comments were really furious at TED for acting out in this way. Parameters to be sure that things are reputable and pass muster as ideas were spreading, that's fine. But taking that beyond where it belongs and all of a sudden plucking from its acceptability, these were 2 talks that had been given the previous December also in London. And it took them till April till the skeptics start, or maybe March, till the skeptics started, who seemed... They won't tell you who's on their science board, but it seems evident that they have skeptics on it. So when they removed these 2 talks by Graham Hancock and Rupert Sheldrake, which I imagine most of your audience, people they are familiar with, they are, to me, they weren't my speakers. They came from this conference in London. And to me, they are... who do I want to listen to? I want to listen to these guys. They are inspirational. They're so clever and so bright, and their work is so well researched and documented and inspired, and in different ways. I mean, 2 different people with 2 different bodies of work. But nonetheless, to me, they are the real goods. Boy, honestly, they're among the handful of people I think are saying the most interesting things out there now. And I'm agreed with by hundreds and thousands of people. So Now, am I okay to continue this monologue here, which I realize I haven't let you get a word in edgewise, Andrew? Are you okay?
Yeah, I'm fine. I guess might as well move on to another subject here because I do have a lot of questions. We could get back to this if we have time. But
well, let me just finish that part up by just saying that the third thing they did, I was their third victim. And summarily, for the first time ever, they canceled a program that was ready to be delivered, which was mine. They took away my license, by which I lost all my sponsors. And in order to put the program on, which I had put on to change the world, I said, I'm not going to throw this program away. I paid for it myself. And after I did that, they got my live stream canceled so that the thousands of people for which I was willing to pay all that money, because I had a huge audience, reached a dead page. So they became aggressively nasty with me, and one wonders why. Why? I was their servant, Okay, so that's the kind of little wrap-up of the headlines, and then, if we get back to it, we will.
All right, thanks for covering that. The two documentaries in question here, I did watch both of them, Crop Circle's Quest for Truth, which is on the UFO TV Studios YouTube channel, and also the documentary What on Earth Inside the Crop Circle Mystery. Could you just briefly tell us what is the difference in regards to material between those two documentaries?
Yes, indeed. The first one was 10 years before the second one, and it was the first feature film ever made about the circles. There have been videos, a lot of videos, but a real Hollywood film with score and, all the kind of bells and whistles that go into making a professional film. And both of them are award-winning films, by the way. The first one is more of a history of the crop circles, and the second one, after that was finished, there was another one to be made, which is the second one. It's the passion of the people who have devoted their lives to this. Why did people leave really interesting careers in academia, elsewhere, and just turn themselves over to becoming crop circle researchers, aficionados, people who produce the conferences, write the books, take the pictures, all the ways in which people from all over the world have become a little advocacy group for crop circles, and it's that group that are the stars of my movie. I knew who the most interesting people were. I knew who had the most interesting stories, and I wanted to bring. This isn't about are they real or aren't they real. This is about the passion of the people who believe they're real. If you want to, at the end of it, not believe it, hey, but I'm bringing you the reasons to open your eyes to why it really is something to pay attention to. And I love my movie. So did the New York Times. I almost didn't survive the shock of that. Getting a good review in the New York Times is the ultimate for a filmmaker. And I have a little modest film in a way. It's not a big Hollywood blockbuster. And that I got a good review in the New York Times for What on Earth, I tell you, was one of the great moments of my life. In fact, somebody took a picture of me opening the Times, and I am so frantic. They took a video, actually. And I am so frantically excited that I couldn't even put it on YouTube. I look like a crazy person. So, but those are, they go together, actually. They go rather nicely together, the two of them. And, the second one, the first one, I hired a filmmaker. I went and found an Academy Award-nominated documentary filmmaker, and I went to school on him. I ran the shoot, and I watched what he did. And, in this age when you don't have to be a Hollywood studio to turn out a movie, I thought, I can do that. And I had this, zeal to make a film about the passion of the aficionados. And so I just, in a way, fools rush in, where angels fear to tread is quite something to make a movie, actually. I learned a lot of that when I decided to do it myself. But I am the filmmaker on the second one. I'm the producer, I'm the director, I'm the narrator, I'm in it. So you get a dose of me in the second one. I'm a little bit in the first one, not much.
All right, thanks a lot. I guess we'll start with the in order who, what, when, where, why, and how. So let's start with the who. Who is making crop circles? Well, it's a percentage factor. Some are made by secret government technology. Some are made by the consciousness of Mother Earth. And according to George Kavaslis, who told me this in the second of two interviews I did with him, about 70% of crop circles are made by extraterrestrials, benevolent ones, benevolent in their own unique way, he did stress, benevolent extraterrestrials who are trying to guide humanity in a particular direction. With that being said, can you confirm, yes, the majority of crop circles, that's probably what they are, and there is some Mother Earth consciousness and secret government technology involved as well?
Well, the things that you stated are, for my money, far too definitive. We are still kind of scratching our heads, uncertain about just how much hoaxing there is and where they come from. In fact, somebody is asked in my movie, who's making them? And I like her answer. She says, not us, and doesn't go any further. I don't know where they come from. Do they come from another dimension? Do they come from ships from other parts of the galaxy, the universe, whatever? We really don't know. We have no evidence to indicate that they come from one place or another. All we can do is see what they leave behind and examine it and say, oh, we don't do that. We can't do that. And the most definitive of the evidence is what we got in the laboratory. Early on, they used to do a fair amount of laboratory work on them with real scientific protocols, where they would examine the plants and they would examine the soil and discover that there were changes that we couldn't account for. They just wouldn't exist here. And so we're just left with the fact that, no, we can't have made those. Now, as far as how many of them, then all along there's been this hoaxer element. They're like the terrorists of the crop circle world. They really drive you crazy. Not quite as, serious as that, but serious. And they were gadflies for many years, just annoying us, and research would be done on formations that would turn out to have been made by people, all that wasted effort when we're thinking we're dealing with something mysterious and we're looking for the messages in them or whatever information we could glean from them, because they are encoded with a lot of information. But the only ones that become really interesting are the ones that we can't, that aren't put there by people. I don't care what people code in. That's just a game people are playing. But what we're really interested in is the ones that are coming from this mysterious source, whatever it may be. And so they were always muddling the waters. And it, unless you take the material into the lab, which is an expensive process, it's not that definitive. You look for signs. You can't be totally sure all the time. There are signs. But, you're not left with definitive information. This is, that isn't. And as far as the percentages go, now, again, we're just kind of trying to extrapolate from what we know and figure out what's going on. It would seem like over the years, more and more of them are being hoaxed to the point where I have some possible suspicion that the phenomenon has moved and that everything we're getting in the hot spot, where every year we knew that we were going to get wonderful formations, and that's where all these researchers from all over the world gather every summer in England in this relatively small area. So they are still getting them there, but there is some possibility that there's no real phenomenon there anymore, and that the center, if it conceivably has moved to the Netherlands, where the most interesting things are going on. And if I were the great crop circle makers from who knows where, and I looked at, what should we do now? I would see that the hoaxers have become so nasty. As I started to say, there's something about these negative forces or narrow limiting forces, fundamentalist forces that have such an edge to them. I mean, why can't they talk like civilized people and just suggest things or ask things? They attack and they call names, and it's across the boards in many different categories. And so if I were the real deal, sending this communication to Earth, which I think is just to let us know we're not alone, because once we absolutely realize that, once we take that for a fact and not for science fiction, our whole psyche is going to change. It's the fastest thing that could get this world on a different track that could happen. It could happen through the UFOs as well, but it's harder to pin down there because they're so ephemeral. The crop circles you can study, and if people paid attention to the evidence and saw that we can't account for what's going on, we might change the world radically. People would really have to think again, and then we would be one humanity in relation to the other. There'd be another to relate to, whether we knew it or not. We'd know that it exists. And so we could be in one conversation kind of dealing together about this otherness where we don't have anything outside ourselves now. It's just us against us, So it'd be very, very healing if, in fact, the evidence were examined and we saw headlines that said, visit, contact. We're not shaking their hands, but we've looked at the evidence and we see we are being visited. So this would be tremendously helpful. But I think now the place to look is in Holland, and there's some very interesting things going on there, because I think maybe this ugliness got so intense in England, where you used to go over there as a tourist, it's a big tourist trade. And it was so delightful. And for those of us who were involved also, we compared notes. We couldn't wait. We speculated together. It was just the most thrilling arena until it got nasty, and it got nastier and nastier with all these names being called and critiques and put downs and whatever. And so it wouldn't surprise me if the real deal were no longer appearing in this place. And I listen to my cohorts over there who are in England. I listen to what they've seen on the ground. I listen to their examination of what's going on with the phenomenon and for their appraisals of what they think, all of which is not for sure, but the people who are giving me their appraisals have had a lot of experience, and I trust that that what they're telling me is likely. So I'm more interested in what's going on else. And there have been more in other countries as well. This phenomenon is all over the world. It just concentrates in England, so that if you wanted to study it, you'd know where to go. In the rest of the world, you're not sure where it'll turn up, including the U.S. They come occasionally, wherever they come. And so I don't know that we have that focus anymore in England. Open question, but I'm leaning to the fact that from my reports I get that conceivably everything in England this year was hoaxed.
Well, that is a shame. We'll probably get into that in a little bit later. But what is a crop circle? Well, George Kavasilis, in my interview with him, he elaborated on what a crop circle is. The ones that are created by extraterrestrials who are trying to guide humanity in a particular direction. First of all, the symbolism of the crop circle in and of itself, simply looking at it, can affect you at a subconscious level to guide you in whatever direction the extraterrestrials in question are trying to guide humanity on. And he also explained that the image of a crop circle that you see on the ground is not the whole crop circle. Outside the frequency range of visible light, you would actually see a much more sophisticated geometric shape around the crop circle, and I'm going to guess that this might have something to do with the energies that people are feeling whenever they walk into a crop circle. People say that meditation is a lot more enjoyable in a crop circle, and also like compasses will start spinning in opposite directions. And I remember watching in the documentary, the What on Earth one, they said many people who are not at the crop circle yet, when they're on the outside of the crop circle, they actually can feel the effects when they're not in the crop circle. So that adds credibility, if you will, to the idea that the crop circle is much bigger in a frequency range outside visible light. So do you maybe agree with that and give your take on the what is a crop circle question, maybe?
Well, what is a crop circle is this indentation in crop. And when we say crop, in truth, these things have appeared all over the world in virtually everything that grows, including young pine trees with trunks, like 2-3 inch thick trunks, and they've bent over, and it has certain characteristics. What happens to all the plants in the real deal is the plants are not, they don't snap, even though some of the stalks are thick, like particularly there's been a couple of those in the young pine trees, but there's an early crop in England that is canola, which they call oilseed rape, which has a celery-like stalk. And that's a favorite canvas for the crop circles. And they don't break. They bend over. Well, these things don't bend. If you bent them yourself, you'd snap them. So there are some characteristics of how the circles are made. Basically, they're shapes, though, and many of them are geometric. Many of them are, some of them are freeform, but many of them are mandalas or comprised of sacred geometry. And when we say they affect people, the universe is made up of sacred geometry. And the beginning of this interest in this phenomenon, the idea was in the air that it's very good to stare at the shapes because they are coherent. They pull you into a coherence of your own. And in fact, there's a very profound person who practices Chinese medicine. He's the head of some kind of association on the East Coast, and he has particular formations identified for particular diseases, so that he'll make his patients stare at the shape. You can draw the geometric shape corresponding to what came in on the ground, and he'll have his patients stare at those shapes, which he feels he has identified as to what will pull their patients into help with whatever disease they're dealing with, or various diseases that they're dealing with. Now that was the first part. You asked about the effect on people. Now, where'd you go from there? There was another part to that.
Well, the whole thing about a crop circle can be thought of as a two-dimensional representation.
Oh, the dimensional thing, yeah. Well, if you think about like an orange or an apple, and you slice it across, you get a flat two-dimensional pattern. Well, if you think of the apple or the orange as a regular three-dimensional object that we took a slice out of the center to get the two, well, that might be what you could think of the crop circles as. And in fact, there was a wonderful book early on, a hardcover book that was beautifully done called The Gift, and it was all about these three-dimensional shapes that are as if you cut through a core. And he had a premise about them being models for a spaceship. I don't know about that, but it's very logical to extend those shapes on either side in a symmetrical way and get a sense of the shape. And indeed, when people do approach crop circles, frequently the energy is palpable. And sometimes too hot, they won't get in because it's repulsed them. Not that it's bad, it's just intense. And then we have situations when people do go into crop circles and actually have physical effects. There's a little bit of healing that's gone on. And if you see What on Earth, you'll see a couple of examples of that. I was almost afraid to put some things in What on Earth because they sound so off the charts, like, huh, really? Except what I limited myself to were the stories that were being told by my close friends who were themselves participatory to whatever the situation is. So you'll see one story in there by one of the absolute main people in the crop circle world. He's an author. He writes a lot of books. He's very bright. And he helped carry a woman in a wheelchair into a crop circle. She hadn't walked for a long time, and she got out and was walking around the circle, and he helped carry the wheelchair back without her in it. She walked back. Now, I wouldn't go to crop circles the way you go to Lourdes, for instance. Cure is in the air, hopefully, there. It certainly has a heavy preponderance of possibility. It's occasional in crop circles, but you do get those stories, and they're doing some testing on that as well. Lucy Pringle, who's one of the good photographers over there, also has a body of work where she hooks people up to the computer, to devices that are, attached to their bodies to see their reactions, and whatever that whole situation is, she's measuring the effects of the crop circle on people, and interested in diseases also, and what we might actually get focused on there and be able to learn. And so something's going on, and then of course you have your in fact, in this most recent Dutch crop circle that got a lot of attention, I was just reading a report where a parapsychologist came over to investigate it, and he had this fully charged battery on his phone, and he went into the crop circle and there was no more battery. Now, that's a common story, not always, but often enough that, it's not just once in a while. There's something going on. There's something, there's an energy field there, electromagnetic something that's affecting things. And again, you'd see we have more stories like that in What on Earth that are from very credible sources. So it's impressive that we have a story here, worth paying attention to. It's not just guys from the pub who's stomping around in the fields.
Okay, let's move on to the whole issue of timelines of crop circles and time and place. Let's try to combine when and where. You already explained that more crop circles are appearing in the Netherlands. Well, that's in the present time. I guess you can give us a history of where and when crop circles started appearing and where and when they have appeared up until the present day, and maybe get into the future of where you maybe expect crop circles to appear more often in the future. So get into that, the time and place of crop circles.
Right. Well, in the lore, people who are who know the story, so to speak, we go back to 1678 as the first time there was evidence of what we in contemporary times have come to call crop circles, and that was named in this contemporary era, not way back when in 1678. But there's a woodcut, and there's a little story that goes along with it that says that someone approached the farmer to make a deal about harvesting the crop, and the farmer didn't like the price, and he said, "Let the devil take the da-da-da." And then there's a little picture of a little devil and this thing that is clearly a crop circle that appeared, apparently, when this farmer made his protest about not wanting to pay, and it's a crop circle. It's a woodcut. That was the communication device of the day, a little pamphlet in Old English, and then ever since then, every 100 years or so, in whatever the literature of the day was, they have found references to this situation in fields with formations in them that would get some kind of flurry of communication or interest, and then it would die and it would go away. And every 100 years, you have little examples. In our movie, in What on Earth, we talk about a situation from 1890 in Nature magazine, reported in Nature magazine, which is a prestigious British science journal. And that was followed up by, after the initial report, which we kind of recreate for you, a little dramatic fashion in the movie. It was followed up in a few issues by a few more letters to the editor and a few little exchanges, and again it went away. And it may be, it was just in the contemporary era, which probably started in the late 70s, certainly in the 80s and onward, that the interest, again, was initiated. The circles were found and stories appeared, and then it didn't go away. And I think possibly the reason it never went away during this contemporary era is because we have airplanes flying overhead who can really appreciate the shapes as they never had in the previous eras. They would just find these things on the ground. But when you're on the ground in a complicated crop circle, you haven't the faintest idea what that shape is. And then when you get above it, it's awesome. It's like, oh my, the most visited one ever. That may have been supplanted in later years, but for a long time, the most visited one ever appeared right outside of Stonehenge. It was in, let me get my year straight, it was 2000, 2000, no, it was not, it was 1996, yes, 1996. And the story goes, this is what happened. It appeared. The farmer was really angry. He's got this damaged crop. Everything's and then somebody showed him an aerial, and it was so gorgeous They call it a Julius set. It's a little fractal curve. It's right outside Stonehenge. And he got so excited looking at it that he said, "Oh, I'm not going to cut that out." And in fact, he put up a sign for the first time that said, "See England's best crop circle. Put money in the box." And so it started the tradition of what they call over there honesty boxes, where the farmer will put up a sign that says, "Put £1 in if you want to go in this circle." One of the problems with the honesty boxes is they used to get stolen. That was an issue, how to keep the honesty boxes from being broken into and removed. Gosh, this wonderful world we live in. But he made a lot of money. He made more money he had thousands of people going into that circle, and he made more money than if he'd sold the crop, because once the formation appears in the field, if it's not walked on by people, when the harvester comes along, they can get under it. It's springy enough. But once people have walked in it, the crop is lost to the farmer. And ever since that incident, those honesty boxes, to the best of the farmer's ability to not have them stolen, became a source of income to compensate them for what they lost.
Okay, and in regards to the future, where do you expect maybe to see more, or maybe do you really not know the answer to that question?
Well, as I told you, what I see the pattern now, which seems to be that more and more hoaxes, possibly withdrawal from this primary spot in England, and much more in many other countries in the world. If you get on a website, which is not mine, but it's the one that reports each circle as it comes in, it's cropcircleconnector.com, and you can see the year and where they've appeared all over the world. And the stories, it's not just that there are formations that appear to be the real deal in Holland, but there's some very interesting reports to give you about all that, about a very psychic guy. His name is Robert, with 2 B's. And Robert, the crop circles, pretty much, just like they appear in this little area in England, fairly concentrated. Well, they're fairly concentrated around where he lives in the Netherlands. And in fact, he predicts he's very psychic, and he predicts when they're going to arrive or when one just has arrived. Oh, he gets this feeling, and he goes to a spot, and there it is. And it's rather remarkable, actually. So that's a whole other kind of fascination. They seem to have made a contact with a conduit there that adds another layer of fascination to the whole situation. Just to branch off here into the messages, so to speak, a lot of interest. There is a lot of interest always in what are they trying to say, and indeed, in any given formation that is a substantial one, there's a lot of information encoded. People from many different disciplines will kick in. Somebody from chemistry will say, "Oh, I see the formula in there," and somebody from astronomy will say, "Hey, there's a comet that is coming soon, and this is like a precursor to it. Look, it has all the elements of blah, blah," all these kind of ways of, so that they're not like snowflakes, which are geometric but random. They're not telling, they don't have anything that had to have a mind in order to design it. Well, the crop circles had to have a mind in order to put in this program, this information. So people often say, well, what's the message? Almost as if they could, like it's hieroglyphics, and if we knew the alphabet, we'd have the whole message, or it's a jigsaw puzzle. And as the pieces come in, we're seeing the larger picture. I don't think that's what's going on at all. What I think is it doesn't really matter what those encoded pieces of information are. They are just the fact that there are encoded pieces of information indicating that we have a source that's intelligent and that's thinking like us. And it means we're not the only intelligence in the universe. That would humble us. So we would have to really take our place in a much larger reality than the one in which we are the masters of the universe. And it would be a kind of a second phase, you might say, or that's not quite the right way to talk about it, but it would be the first time since Galileo, Earth out of the center of the universe, where again we were the masters, we were the center of the universe, and now after Galileo, we were one tiny speck in an incredible panoply of, stars and galaxies and what have you. Well, we couldn't be so arrogant anymore. And same thing if this next piece drops in definitively, like it did definitively with Galileo after he was put under house arrest for this really unacceptable opinions he had, which of course were true. So this would be the next kind of big move to take us out of that arrogance. And arrogance is not helping us now. I mean, it is what kind of keeps in place this viciousness that humanity operates with, so destructive to the planet and to each other. And, if we got humbled again and put in our place of, just being one among other intelligences, not the big cheese at all, this would really be very good for us. And at that level, it's really quite a shame that these things are being ridiculed or not taken seriously, that the evidence is not being examined, because, in fact, it would be very good for us to discover that this is, in fact, the real deal, that we are being visited. We're robbing ourselves of that inspiration and stimulation to get us to a better place. So even thinking about it, even thinking about the otherness as real, not scary science fiction, but, there's nothing scary about the crop circles. If we're not alone and the crop circles are our evidence, what we've got evidence of is a very sweet energy that we share the universe with. I don't know, maybe there are malevolent forces, but they're certainly not evident in the crop circle situation, and nothing to be really concerned about, like, we'll let something bad in or some such if we open our minds to it all. So, I keep standing on my soapbox, making these movies and speaking and just encouraging people to, chill, don't be so judgmental. Don't think you know the answers. Don't think you're such wise guys. Oh, it's just people, or they can do anything, whatever. Back off and take in the possibility of this incredible, wonderful, visitation that may be occurring that really would cause us to think again, and we need to think again. So, I feel really strongly about my little cheerlead here.
Thanks.
People can see my trailer. If they get on cropcirclemovie.com, my trailer is there, and you'll get the sense from the trailer of what you'd find in the movie.
Right. And I'd like to get into the why. Well, we already got into the why somewhat when I explained earlier that, according to George Kavassilis anyway, that most crop circles, 70%, are made by extraterrestrials trying to guide humanity in a particular direction. But for the purposes of this question, why are they appearing where they're appearing? Well, this has to do with the ley line factor in regards to Great Britain. Everybody says, well, that's where the ley lines cross, and many people have gone to Stonehenge, where you say crop circles have appeared by. They walk by a certain area in Stonehenge, and then they get zapped, and that's because they walked past the ley line, and Stonehenge, of course, is a ley line convergence hotspot. But now you're saying, well, more of them are appearing in the Netherlands. Well, is the Netherlands a hotspot of ley line activity, by the way, and other places where crop circles are appearing?
Well, when you reduce it to ley lines, and indeed there are such things, and in fact there are a couple of significant ones that crisscross across England, the Mary line and the Michael line, and where they cross there are beautiful churches, and they seem to be energy lines. But that's only when we think about why the crop circles have concentrated in this little area of England, and indeed we do talk about that in One on Earth. There are, and we're speculating, there they are, and we are figuring out why did they choose here, There are more things in the ley lines that would really make it logical that they chose this little area. The chief among them being, I guess you could say, related to ley lines. Those are energy lines of the earth. But you will find, in fact, all over the world, a correspondence to the nature of where they land, which is that they land near ancient things. In America, they typically will land near Indian burial grounds or things that we consider, somewhat sacred or have a sense of wholeness about them. We have some mounds here that were created like pyramids, in America. They'll land near those. And all over the world, if you look at where crop circles come in and look at the territory near that, you'll find near there pretty much always something ancient and that seems to represent a more holistic point of view, and that's Holland as well. And then in England, as I say, there are many. If you were the force and you had to pick your spot, this English spot would be a very logical one. In that, as I started to say, there's not only ley lines in this area, but it's an ancient sacred landscape. Stonehenge, probably the most famous to Americans about one of the. It's kind of the southern. Border or side of this little circle of area where they appear. That's in Hampshire County. North of that is Wiltshire County, and Hampshire and Wiltshire are your hotbeds for English crop circles, and that's an area that used to have a lot of sacred ceremony in it. Avebury is just as famous in many quarters, a very different kind of stone circle from Stonehenge, but very, very famous. And you can hardly turn around in this area without being falling over some ancient tumuli or burial ground or something that is the remnant of when sacred ceremony was being conducted in this beautiful area. It's just beautiful there. I mean, I always thought of England before I ever got there as industrial, but no, it's just beautiful countryside, farmland, private farms, not agribusiness. I mean, it's very charming. And so I think the sacred aspect of this whole little area really is heavily responsible for why it was chosen for the circles. And then it's close to a major city, or about an hour and a half out of England, so that if ever it was got to the point where attention was being paid in a significant way, you wouldn't be in the boonies where nobody could get to it, So that seems to be another good reason. And then there's also an aquifer. It's limestone in this area, which is very porous and a lot water under the surface, and it's a great conductor of electromagnetism, and a lot of what's going on in the circle seems to be electromagnetic, and so that's another of the reasons why you would have chosen this little area if you were the great circle makers. So again, you'll see that in What on Earth. We talk about that a bit in the movie. But it's just lovely over there. It's a shame if the circles have really left there, because it really was the most wonderful place to go in the summertime. And the countryside is beautiful. The phenomenon is compelling, and the atmosphere used to be wonderful. It was such a enthusiastic and loving atmosphere, but it's a little contentious now. It's it doesn't have its same charms anymore. But maybe they'll send in 1,000 in one night, and all of a sudden, everyone's will perk up, and everything will be reinvigorated. And I keep my fingers crossed for that. Actually, that they do something really startling to get us out of this little implosion we've gotten into, thanks to the antagonism of the hoaxers. So you put out a good thought for that now, Andrew. Get your people all thinking. Request visitation in major scale. And they could
Yes,
do it. Why not? In fact, there was 36, I believe. We somebody in the movie talks about that. There was one night early on in the phenomenon when I think 36 or 33 of them arrived in one night. So good luck hoaxing. There's not that many people doing it that could account for so many in one night. That was another little piece of corroboration that we had a real phenomenon.
Right, and yet people buy the whole Doug and Dave story and makes you want to laugh. But we do have a question here in the chat room here. Let me just scroll up the screen a little bit. Here it is. Hang on a minute. Someone just typed in. All right, hold on a second. Are there certain crop circles that are meant to activate our DNA? Do you know anything about that?
Well, not specifically that I would describe that way. We did have a DNA three-dimensional circle where that also came in 1996, where it was the first time they used proportion so that you could see this thing was, the two strands were circling each other, and they got bigger. The bigger the circles, they were made up of circles, and the circles got bigger as they came toward you. It was quite a clever little crop circle, and so that seemed to be just a circle that represented DNA. But I don't know about any, particular communion that's going on where your DNA has any particular reaction to crop circles.
Oh, well, thanks for giving your take on it. One other thing in the chat room here says, as humans, as multidimensional beings, we can travel in our astral body as orbs and create these circles with other people in order to leave messages for our awake consciousness to receive. That reminds me of that popular video showing orb UFOs creating a crop circle. A lot of people assumed that the video was fake because the person who shot the video had experience and I think a job too in altering film and such. So everybody said, well, that's kind of in your face that it's a hoax, but others asserted, no, that's just a strange coincidence, and if you want proof that the video is not a hoax, just look at the fact that no one's been able to prove that video fake. I'm sure you know which video I am talking about.
Oh, I do. I know
here.
It very well. It's all over the
net. So tell us what you know about that specific crop circle and the UFOs that made it.
I believe that was also 1996, and it was a subject of great interest when it first arrived in this wonderful conviviality where everybody met at the Barge Inn, the pub that was the center of crop circle activity, and people came with that video and showed it, and it was it was like for the first time someone caught a crop circle in the process of being made. You see these orbs circling around, and it's a flat, or not a flat field, but it's a field with, a crop growing in it, and all of a sudden, down goes, under the orbs, down goes the shape. So then questions arose. Wait a minute, is this for real? And it was months and months where a controversy went back and forth and back and forth. There's voluminous reportage about it and all kinds of trickery and all kinds of switching of who's this? No, it's not him. It's another guy. Oh, he has the same name and whatever. I mean, it's like a C movie or some such. But when that all came down to is it or isn't it, there are still some holdouts that believe it's for real, but the preponderance of opinion, when you look at all the evidence, is that indeed it was done in a lab by someone who indeed was employed in a lab, and that there's only a few heretics that are clinging to the idea that was the real deal. So unfortunately, it would be lovely if it were the real deal. We do have eyewitness accounts, though. Maybe, I don't know how many. There used to be a center that used to collect information, and then that disbanded. And before that disbanded, I think they had 25 eyewitness reports, and then there are some that have come in that have occurred since then. And they all say approximately the same thing. People just happen to be around when a crop circle is forming, and they watch it. And they all say that they go down in about 6 or 7 seconds, just like in that video, actually. Not necessarily that orbs, they don't talk about orbs making them. They just talk about, all of a sudden, and they say that the air gets very agitated prior to that. Animals start making a lot of noise. It's farm country. So you have cows and, sheep and whatever start getting really agitated. And then in 6 or 7 seconds, with no indication of craft, in other words, no indication of what the source of that's making them is, they just see that these things swoosh down in the field. We have a little recreation of that in my movie. It's not for real, since there isn't any for real of that situation. Nobody's ever caught them being made on film. And, I don't know. I guess when you're standing around and it happens in 6 or 7 seconds, you haven't even got your camera out, But they all do say that. They all say they go down. No matter how complex they are, they just swirl down, and the whole formation swirls down in 6 or 7 seconds. So, and I believe that's true. That seems to be accurate.
Thanks a lot. And in regards to how crop circles are being made, I believe in, I don't know if this was one of your crop circle documentaries, the Quest for Truth one, or maybe some other, where some guy talked about how a vortex of some sort had to be used to create a crop circle. Well, that would raises the issue of crop circles are created by a percentage factor, like some by ETs, some by the consciousness of Earth, and some by secret government technology. Well, which one would the vortex technology be with? So why don't you tell us, to the best of your knowledge, how they're being made?
No, I wouldn't. I would not agree that some are made by secret technology and some are made. We don't know how they're made. That's what I said to you. Those statements are too definitive, as if we know something we don't. We don't know that. I don't think we have secret government technology. First of all, it can come down from lasers and tasers and satellites. I've written about that, where I've gotten information from people who know enough to say how that might work and that it wouldn't work. And, why would the government be wasting its time doing that? Really, I mean, it defies kind of logic as well. And there's no evidence that it's being done that way. We have no evidence of what's delivering them at all, none whatsoever. We just know we get them, and then we examine them, and we go, we couldn't have made this, and there you are, And again, that percentage, I don't know, it's puzzling all of us how many. Nobody's really sure what the percentages are, and they perhaps even keep changing. So we're in mystery in a lot of that your guy seems to think he knows the answers to, but I would argue with that. Maybe he knows more than I know, but those things don't seem right to me.
Well, just go with your gut and go with your heart, and you're likely to get the answers you seek. But let's talk about specific crop circle formations and what they mean. I remember there was a documentary on the History Channel, I believe it aired around 2004, 2005, about crop circles, and at the very end of the documentary they showed a crop circle which people said had something to do with the end of the Mayan calendar. And I did read Daniel Pinchbeck's book 2012, The Return of Quetzalcoatl, and I remember him appearing in the crop circle What on Earth documentary. Can you tell us anything about that specific crop circle that I'm referring to that has to do with 2012 and what crop circles may have had to do with the Mayan calendar end date?
Well, the only one that specifically seemed to relate to that date that was forthcoming at the time, was prior to that, is actually in my movie. It's in 2000. It's a formation in 2008, and what they gave us was a view of the solar system. So if you could picture a lot of concentric rings, which are the rings of the planets and their orbits, and then they have the planets on the rings in a configuration that corresponds to the way the planets would relate to one another on that date that was being predicted in 2012. That was typical of what happens in this crop circle world, where you will get these indications of the circle makers reading us and knowing our story and giving us reflections of what it is we already know. And again, to me, that's to let us know that it's another intelligence winking at us, that we aren't alone. So, that formation is very beautiful and set beautifully, beautifully laid, and there's the configuration from 2012 that we were looking forward to. But I think that's the only one that specifically related to that. And what was that anyway? But except a lot of attention we were paying to the possibility that it was going to be a meaningful date. I think it's our attention that got, if anything meaningful happened, it's because so much attention, I think, was on it, not necessarily because really it was the indication of something underlying that actually was going to happen. There was a lot of kind of human construct in making up that story, I believe. And I don't think, if you look back now that we're past that date, I don't think you could point to that date and say, oh, that was a pivotal date. But I do think, in a way, because there was so much focus on it, I do think that there was an amping up of our coming together. And that's good. I mean, anything that does that is good for us. So, I would say those are the kind of things I would say about that. Do you think that anything happened in do your other guests talk about that date as having really amounted to anything?
Oh yes, I can give you several different sources here. Andrew Bartzis said that was the date that for the first time ever we got to experience universal dream time, where during dream time you got to make the decision: are you going to do your part to raise consciousness, or are you going to be a sheeple? I also remember Andromeda Council contactee Tolek saying that the core of the Earth on that day, because of the galactic alignment, that would cause the core of the Earth to blossom into a fourth dimensional core, which and over the course of time the Earth would turn fourth dimensional. And as a matter of fact, I remember on In 5D Radio, Jim Self, a guest, talked about how after the 2012 end date, you are free. I believe he meant that in the sense that it doesn't matter what you do after that date. The timeline is already set, and the end result will already happen no matter what you or anybody else does. So in that sense, you are free. As far as the crop circles go, the one that you referenced with the alignment of the planets on that date, Greg Braden also talked about a crop circle formation in which you saw all the planets and the orbit of the Earth, the third planet from the sun. There was no planet in that orbit, and I guess you don't know which crop circle I was referring to.
Oh, no, I know that one too. That was very famous. That was way before that. And indeed, that caused a lot of interest of Earth is missing. What does that mean? What are they telling us? And in fact, when you do read the messages or what seems to have been encoded in many of them, you will get kind of cautionary messages. Watch out! Change your ways. Be better people. All that sort of thing. There does seem to be some critique of our behavior going on, and some encouragement for us to change it, and that goes through many of the crop circles. Well, not many, but several of the crop circles, enough so that it's significant. So something seems to be telling us that, even though I don't think that's the main objective. Anybody watching us would be concerned about what we're doing, and if they're going to send communications, you'd find some reflection of that in them, and I think that is what's happening.
Right, and some other crop circle formations that I'd like to discuss. Dan Pinchbeck, in his 2012 Return of Quetzalcoatl book, it seemed that one crop circle formation that he seemed extremely obsessed with, for whatever the reason, was a crop circle that is like you got the central core and you got arms branching out of the crop circle, and in that arm is many different circles, one circle after the other going out, and There's some crop circles that look like that where it's just maybe one or two arms, but there were some that were really big where central circle, then there's circles in the arms going all the way out. I'm sure maybe you know what I'm talking about here. What is it about those crop circles that are so fascinating?
Well, that's a kind of you might say, somewhat typical. Those are those mandala sort of things. And I'm not remembering about whether the one that he's talking about in the book is this fabulous one that came in. In fact, it came in the year we were filming the first movie in 2001. And it was, at the time, and possibly still, the largest one ever. And there were 6 arms, and they were fractals, so that the arms were comprised of circles that got smaller and smaller in the spirally kind of patterns, and then off of each circle were smaller circles in that fractal kind of a way. And there were 409 separate circles in the formation, and when I talk about this, when I say to people, think about this, it was the size of 2 football fields. We end the movie with this. We have a very sweet little pullback of a helicopter that looks like it's over just one circle, and by the time we go up high enough, the helicopter is a pinprick, and the whole formation is revealed to you, under in the view you're getting from up high. It was spectacular. They called it a Catherine wheel after something in the Bible. Don't press me on that, but something related to this thing called a Catherine wheel. And it was just mind-boggling. How in the world, can you just think about the size of 2 football fields? When you were in that, you had no idea what the pattern was. It was impossible. There were circles everywhere. You just everywhere, turn around. Oh my God, circles, 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 big, little, whatever. But it was when you pulled above it and got a look from the air. We flew also in helicopters and shot from the air. And oh my God, it was so spectacular. So that may have been the one that. Do you remember when Daniel's book came out? Would that have corresponded to a 2001?
It was 2007. It was 2007 when he wrote that.
Oh well, then truly, that's what he was talking about, because that one got CNN there. The media does very little with the circles. Occasionally, in fact, all the cable stations every few years will do a new piece that they'll run for years, and most of them are pretty cynical. They're snide and they're kind of laughing or ridiculing or whatever. And aside from that, the circles make very little news, but I think that's some function of the way news is generated in general, which is that anything that's kind of, like, for instance, if you're going to have a press conference, something must happen. You have to have an event. You can't have a press conference about a phenomenon that's just ongoing. And I think that is the way the press is. This thing just year after year after year, and something startling has to happen that's outside the norm of the yearly ordinary stories. And this one was so big that indeed it did get the national press there. CNN was there. And that, I think that's actually the last time that there was any, even relatively significant amount of press that was generated by the circles. There hasn't been any new occurrence, nothing broke the pattern of what they were doing before like that one did, because it was so big that, has made what we consider to be news. That's why I say I wish that, they'd land 1,000 in one night. That would be news. That would make all the papers.
Right. One other crop circle formation I do want to discuss. Linda Moulton Howe, in a presentation she did at the MUFON conference that was at Cherry Hill recently that I was at, she talked about how a UFO that people saw in the sky, took a picture of it. There was some information on the side of the UFO. She did some research on that, and I believe she talked about how that led her to uncovering a certain symbol in her research, and then later on she found that there was a crop circle with that exact symbol. Do you by any chance know anything about that story?
Well, I've heard Linda do that presentation, and so Oh, how honest do I want to be with you, or whatever. To the best of my knowledge, that is a hoax circle. And I spoke to Linda. I said, Linda, you have a whole story that leads to a punchline, and it's all built around this formation. And I think it's a hoax one. That my information is it's hoax. She actually just didn't want to hear that, and so we just had to leave it there. She said, no, it's real. Oh, okay. So you're asking me now? It's a very complex story of symbols appearing here and there and related to each other. I can't even remember quite what the story was, but I don't think doesn't have credence for me. So you have to ask me another question. Sorry, Linda.
All right. That's fine. I guess I'll ask you the question in the chat room here that I saw earlier. How many dates or events have been accurately tied to crop circles? And if so, if there were any, when is the next big date or event, if there are such crop circles that can answer that?
No, I don't think there are any predictions out there now, because there have been. They'll something will have some kind of dating in it. It looks like something will happen on a date, and then things have sort of happened maybe on that date or maybe not. Or, we have a lot of fuzz out there in crop circle land, as, you would expect from something as strange and unusual as this. But there's nothing predictive, to the best of my knowledge, going, particularly because we're so thinking that we're dealing with a lot of hoaxes now. And what's going on in Holland that I'm telling you, I think perhaps the phenomenon has moved over there. The shapes are not so fascinating. It's not like they're very complex and we're reading all kinds of things. It's just kind of the circumstances of how they're occurring. And I'll tell you about one of them over there this year that got a lot of attention, and there's some story associated with it that goes back to England. There was a formation that was just a circle, it wasn't a complex shape, but it was very beautiful and beautifully laid. I think it was in maize, which is corn, and those are hard to lay. They're big and clunky and whatever, but it was beautifully laid, and there was no damage whatsoever. It was early crop when crop was fairly green, and everything was, nothing snapped, nothing broken, beautifully laid. And then the unusual thing that occurred with that was that 3 days later it was back up as if it had never bent down at all. And that is a characteristic when the circles land early and the crop is very green, and they do come all the way from green crop to when they're really virtually ready to harvest, the day before harvest sometimes. They're very brittle then. Nothing springs back because it has no juice left in it. There's no growing life left. But this thing, even more dramatically than any of the ones that have appeared over the years that have regained their growing, capacity and phototropism takes over and these unbroken plants go back up. This one went really with no evidence it had been down. And then something interesting happened. A challenge was laid out. There's one particular person who has become particularly obnoxious about accusing, this phenomenon of being fake or causing a lot of antagonism and noise and jangle and whatever. And so an invitation was given to him to make a similar thing in a field, and they bought the field for him, the same kind of field as occurred in Holland in maize, corn, and the field was there, and he was invited to, because he said, "Oh, I could make that," and he laid down a particular critique and claim about the fakeness of it and how he could do something, he could do that. And so the offer was made to him to do it, and a donation would be made. It started out to be £250, which is maybe we're not quite double that in dollars. And then it was increased to 700 and something pounds that would be donated to his favorite charity if indeed he could do this thing he claimed was so easy to do. And he just abandoned it. He there's no follow-up. He wouldn't do it. But I thought that was interesting as well, and that again is one of the things coming out of Holland. One of the interesting things coming out of Holland. It's not some of the same kind of stuff as was interesting in England, where shapes were quite fascinating, and some evolution of shapes as the years went on. And one of the geometers over there, and they have brilliant geometers on our side, good geometers analyzing the good formations, and they thought for years, in the early years, that they were getting a progressive course in number and shape, where they started out with obviously circles, then they went to triangular shapes, then they went to square, then they went to, when I say shapes, I mean if you look at the pattern, you see the fundamental pattern in these geometric ones would have the sides kind of the pattern. So then the next year they got 5-sided ones in this flat shapes, and the next year 6, and then let's see, will we get 7? Yes, we got 7 the next year. So there was a kind of a progression going on, and that was one of the things that used to fascinate us in the early years, watching this kind of development of was it a communication to just, again, let us know that something intelligent was running the show and was making these choices and sending these very coherent kind of communications to us. So that kind of thing, that was its era. That's not what's happening in Holland. Other things are happening, like, for instance, the thing I just told you. And the fact that we have somebody there who can sense when they're about to come, which is, quite another interesting development.
Right. Want to get one more thing here about a specific crop circle question in the chat room. I don't know if you know this crop circle. I'm guessing you do. Was the crop circle that spelled out EAN key in binary code a hoax? And if not, then what was its meaning? Do you know about that one?
No, EANT? What is that?
Enki. Enki. That's the... Enki and Enlil from Sumerian lore, from the Sumerian tablets.
I don't know. I don't know this crop circle. No, don't know this. Never heard of this. I wonder if it's a new one that I missed out on, or if it's something old that's not accurate. Because if it was something from the past, I would know it. But that's not familiar to me at all. But there have been messages carved out in binary code, of all things, in wheat, writing binary code in wheat. And there have been a couple of them, and there was one very unusual formation that looked like our typical gray, with the face that, with the big eyes and what have you, and there was a disc that translated to binary code, and it was a cautionary thing. It wasn't just one word; it was a sentence or 2 sentences. Be careful, watch out. Mend your ways, whatever, and that it had that kind of sort of energy to it, and that was a fascinating one actually, because the whole formation was done in what do they call that? Linear. It's like the way it is on television, with the lines are all horizontal lines. If you could see in closely enough to see the underlying structure, if you magnify it big enough, as opposed to newsprint, which is dot matrix. Newsprint, if you magnify it, you'll see it's all made out of dots. Television, if you magnify it, it's all horizontal line. And that particular formation was all done in horizontal line. I mean, just yet another fascinating sort of aspect to it. We had a dot matrix one as well. That was in 2001, which is referred to as the face. And when you were in that one, all you saw were these dots everywhere, and it was very unusual. I mean, we've never had another one like that. But then when you got above it, you saw that the dots made a face that looked very much like that face on Mars that, presumably maybe is left there by something that visited. But it was clearly a face, and only visible from an aerial from above, where you could make out what the dots presented to you as a picture. I just love those little things. That was the only dot one we got, and this was the only line one that we got. Very unusual formations.
Well, as you're giving your take, maybe I'll discuss some other crop circle formations if any other come to mind. The person in the chat room who asked that did provide a link to the crop circle that said Enki EA in binary code. It's kind of hard to describe without a
Do you know what year?
What year? It was before 2012. I don't know. Maybe after the show's over, I'll send you the link. Through an email. But one thing I do want to... I'm
sitting at my computer if you want to, if you think we can do such a thing. I don't know.
Right,
I don't know. Might be too hard to do. Yeah.
Right. This is audio, not video, so this is something that lends credence to video, which we can't do at the moment. But
okay.
Moving on, one thing you did discuss in the What on Earth Inside the Crop Circle mystery documentary was the whole issue about the fact that people just dismiss crop circles, not necessarily, some say it's just a hoax made by the Doug and Dave Chorleys of the world, and others say, well, I'm not even going to bother thinking about it. It's best to just ignore it. Well, this is the whole paradigm thing, the whole fear thing, and well, I guess it's time for me to say something that I've said many times on my show, and it gets more and more hard to swallow every time I say it, but it only makes sense for me to say it because you did discuss this in the Crop Circle documentary in regards to people ignoring crop circles. I mean, first of all, how can the government keep a secret? Well, people need to understand the vast majority of government secrets have been exposed, and in the case of crop circles, it's right in your... It's not a government secret, I'm saying, but things like government secrets and crop circles, they're in your face. They've been exposed, but the problem, unfortunately, is that it's very easy for governments to get away with their secrets being exposed, and it's also very easy to keep putting crop circles in the ground without affecting the human race too much, because I hate to say this, but I got to say it, a very significant percentage of the common people who make up the general public on planet Earth are so paradigmatic, so fearful, and so flat-out stupid that they will refuse to believe something shocking or disturbing, even if the evidence shows that they have no choice but to believe it. And that, unfortunately, ties into the whole issue of why nobody is paying attention to the crop circles or just ignoring it or not trying to find any answers to that issue. So how do you propose we deal with this issue of people wanting to be lost in a trance, and consequently they do not even want to look into what the crop circle issue is all about? What can we do about that?
Really? Well, isn't that challenging? I mean, that is the big challenge of our lives, people like us. How do we get attention paid? And, what I did is I made movies, and I thought, oh, that'll do it. Well, in fact, my movies are well known to the people who already have a predisposition to appreciate them, and getting out into the mainstream is, challenging. People will tell me really wonderful things, like I showed it to my skeptical whoever, son, daughter, mother, whatever. They didn't even want to watch it, and then they watched it again, and they couldn't believe it. I get a lot of that kind of stuff, and it's very heartwarming. It's like, yes, that's what I made it for. But getting the movie, if your listeners would send people to cropcirclemovie.com, they can see the trailer and go from there. It's on iTunes. It's not expensive to watch there, and the DVD is available. I do all that I can to get attention paid, and it's it's work. It's a struggle. People's minds are. You know what I think really goes on for all of this stuff, which is that anything that's going to change the fundamentals will change the world, and that's a little unsettling to people. Even people who are not so happy with how the world is, the idea that it will radically change is, whoa, wait a minute, easier to deal with the problem than the one that you don't know. It's just human nature. I think that's why psychedelics are illegal and alcohol is legal. Psychedelics would change your worldview. And cultures have a way, in the overarching kind of dynamic that a culture is all about, or a civilization is all about, they have a way of not being very open to underlying change. I mean, why they put Galileo under house arrest, for this really heretic position that he maintained, which was true. it's just human nature to resist change. There's something else that after my TED, and not after, because we're sort of still struggling with the aftermath of TED, including that I spent a lot of money for nothing, and they really should pay me back. But I was encouraged after that, after TED was not going to be my big platform anymore. I was encouraged to go on. We have TED Talks, so people said, well, do Sue Speaks or some such. So anyway, I have a program that I'm about to mount that really will deal with radical change. So you asked me what I would do. Well, I'm moving on. Now, this program that I'm about to produce, the speaker, the person who's going to be presenting, is going to be talking about something that is radically changeful, and it's happening. It's going to happen, and we have our head in the sand. We're not dealing with it in the way we deal with short-term reality, except this is really not long-term. It's fairly short-term, that the world is going to change whether we like it or not. And we're not talking about being prepared for it. And this particular thing is, this man just produced a big conference in Los Angeles about robots and how what's going on now in the whole world of robot development and where we're going with that, where robots are going to, between robots and mechanizing jobs, we're not going to have enough jobs. It isn't a matter of retraining. There won't be enough jobs. And it's as big a change as when we went from when we went from hunter-gatherer to agriculture. You have to change the entire economic model to create a world where not enough jobs is sustainable to the world. His advocacy for what to do, because it's a major subject that needs a dialogue and investigation and exploration and creativity about what to do. And the solution he recommends is something that actually was on the ballot in Scandinavia. So it's not like, oh, that's ridiculous. No. It's gotten taken very seriously, which is a guaranteed income for everyone. Now, how you would do that, you have to stop making war. You have to redeploy resources. But in a world that absolutely has to change its economic model, that becomes something serious to talk about. And so if we created a world where everyone has sustenance, everyone has food, everyone has shelter, everyone is provided for, then I think, you have a world that can work, that can get into that next model where it's not dog eat dog, it's not greed ruling the day, it's not the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, but you have a world that can operate with mutuality, with cooperation, with addressing the things that are real challenges to us that we didn't create, like wars, global warming, things like that, running out of oil. Hey, we all need a heads up. We need to be focused on our greatest creativity as a world to deal with what we can't avoid as challenges to us. And, that we're squandering our energies and our money and our resources and our time on all this antagonism while the world, while the world is crumbling, So this particular focus on the fact that we need to be addressing the fact that there won't be enough jobs and what will be our economic model. So, this is my next delivery of something that, I think can be helpful. Crop circles are still there. I'm still trying to get attention on them. I'm still trying to get us to deal with ourselves as one humanity in relation to the other, because there's evidence of the other. But I'm going to go on from here, as I keep doing that in the background, to put a lot of emphasis on how we're going to reorganize this world to deal with the fact that there won't be enough jobs. And it could be really quite a beautiful progression into a much more workable world. You didn't know we were going to talk about that, so I'm just throwing that in on you.
Well, glad you did, but I would like you to maybe give us a little advice here on if people want to make their own crop circles by gathering a group of people and meditating with the intent of creating a crop circle in a certain location. If people wanted to do that, could you maybe give a little bit of advice on what people would have to
Sure.
do if they wanted to do that?
Sure. Now that sounds kind of hokey. Doesn't that sound new agey and woo-woo? Oh, yeah, sure, you meditate. Yeah. Well, guess what? It happens. And again, you'll see in my movie a couple of different stories about that. And the only stories I put in were the ones where I knew the people who were involved, so I knew it wasn't like a third-hand kind of phony story that came along. And I trust these people. They're not your friends, they're my friends, but I trust them because they are. There is that situation over there where people have intentionally meditated. They've gotten a shape in their minds to meditate on. They're in some particular location in England. They're focusing their energy on that field. And son of a gun, if the next day or next night or whatever, they get a crop circle. One of them was a group of Japanese tourists, and what they asked for was something they would recognize. And what happened, the next evening, they woke up, whatever, and they woke up to a crop circle that looked like origami. And we show that in the movie. And then one of the main research people over there was also involved in a meditation with a psychic person, and they all gathered and meditated on a shape, and son of a gun, they got that shape the next day. There are many different kinds of stories about human thoughts and crop circles. For instance, you have a car full of people. They're driving along a road. You drive by a field. They say, oh, look, how nice, a little high rise from a little hilly kind of thing as I look out. Wouldn't it be beautiful if there were a crop circle on the side of that hilly thing? Everybody could see it from this main road. Next day, there's a crop circle there. Oh, they seem to be listening, whoever they are, I don't think they eavesdrop on our personal conversations, but when they're about crop circles, they seem to be able to pick up the frequency of it, and that happens a lot. Just like, what? How could this be? As I say, I debated putting some of that in the movie. I thought, oh, nobody's going to believe this, except, wait a minute, I know these things happen. So, as a documentary filmmaker, I felt somewhat obligated to tell what I knew, and you'll see these stories in my movie. So, whatever, get your groups together. My house is all bricks and cement. I have no place I can do it in my house. So believe me, I would have meditation groups in my house trying to get one in my lawn, but I don't have a lawn. Grass is a place where they do appear. It's one of the, I tell you, they appear in virtually everything that grows. So if you have a lawn that's not, burnt out or scrubby or whatever, that has some, you're ready to mow, don't mow. Get a group of people together and meditate on a shape. See what happens. And let me know.
Well, hopefully some people will take this as inspiration to try that.
Really? But, I'm not kidding. It's a good idea.
Yeah, and I can tell you from experience that something like that should work. At the In 5D Return to Atlantis conference, about 50 people and me gathered in a circle on the quartz crystal sand beach of Sarasota and meditated for, I'd say about maybe 10 minutes. And then we looked above us and we saw that the clouds in the sky were formed in a big circle around us. A coincidence? I don't think so. That's just a sign that energy flows where attention goes. And I would encourage people to try to use that to dissipate chemtrails. That's one useful thing you can do with people, dissipate chemtrails in the sky to meditate like that. But anyway, I'm digressing.
I actually, one of my advocacies, I have a little... I have several tracks I'm on. One track is called Outside the Box Ideas, and I'll be doing more with that, where I make some suggestions of the kind of things we could be doing that we aren't doing that might be helpful. And one of them is to harness thought. I mean, if President Obama said, okay, everybody, at noon every day in every time zone, everybody stop for a minute and meditate on, let's say, peace, whatever. There was some thought that that's how England prevented being invaded in World War II. At noon every day, Big Ben sounded, and the directive in England was stop for a minute and focus our thoughts. Now, that doesn't cost anything. Why don't we have experiments like that? Why don't we try to harness the power of thought? That is so obvious to me and so simple that, I just keep thinking, how can I influence any powers that be to try to get something like that to happen? So again, speaking to your listeners here, if anybody likes this thought, talk to me or link up with me. Get on my mailing list. You can get on my mailing list at cropcirclemovie.com. I don't send out a lot, but what I send out is very interesting, and it's always about how can we make this a better world? How can we become more conscious? How can we wake up the world? So, join me and help me, or let us all do it together, But
okay,
I think that's one good idea that I wish I knew. If I was in any position of power, I would really try to implement that idea to get from the top, from Obama, seriously, to say, come on, let's try something. Everybody think together about, however you want to define whatever the objective might be. Don't you think that's a good idea?
Yes, indeed. It would be a great idea, and people just got to discipline themselves to do it often. By the way, a time check here. We have 9.5 minutes left of showtime. Do want to talk about activity going on inside a crop circle that people have experienced. Compasses like going haywire, electronic equipment going haywire,
Definitely.
also enhanced meditation, and also dowsing rods seem to be affected in some way inside crop circles. Could you maybe elaborate on that stuff? And I guess you can end the show on this subject if you want. You got 9.5 minutes.
Oh, I don't know that I have 9.5 minutes to talk about, but the dowsers are big over there. That's a big category. I don't know that we do that much in the States here. But dowsing has remarkable results. I mean, I know we douse for things like water or oil or what have you, and remarkable results. And dowsing is very big in England and in the crop circles, indeed. But beyond the crop circles, it's a category, that they pay a lot of attention to and have some respect for. And so the dowsers have a field day in the circles. They'll douse for the realness of them. The rods will do nothing in a fake circle, and in the real ones, they'll look for energy lines. They'll look for different kinds of ways in which the thing is laid down, and where there are shifts of the lay and what have you. Or I'm not a dowser, so I can't really give you the details of what they do. I will tell you one interesting dowsing story. I have one of the dowsers is just a wonderful guy named Mike, who's in my movie, and he I don't think we told this story in my movie, so I'll tell you this story. There was a particular formation, it doesn't really matter, but it was the magnetic fields, one of the really beautiful, beautiful formations, 2001 maybe, I think. I'm not too sure. Anyway, so Mike lives 90 minutes or so from crop circle country, and he blindfolded himself. He had his dowsing rods, and he was sitting in the passenger seat of a car. And his objective was to go from where the car started out, where he lives, to get to this magnetic fields crop circle. And all he did was hold his dowsing rods, and as the car drove along, he would say to the driver, okay, take a left here, or maybe the driver got to a T or whatever. He guided him. He guided him by virtue of what the rods were telling him, and they got to that crop circle from 90 miles away or 90 minutes away, whatever it was, long trip. And just by the dowsing rods. There's a communication to the universe going on that it's almost like we as beings are conduits for some truth of the universe or force in the universe, and the rods are just the extension of ourselves that can perform, but it's really us. It's the energy coming through us that actually can give you a lot of like they do find water. They walk along and the rods say bend, and there they go, and oh my God, something's underneath there. But it isn't just geographic effects. It isn't just effects of what's on the land. You can get these dowsers will use the rods for virtually. Oh, I realize I have two dowsers in there, and another one's a very beautiful guy from Scandinavia who tells you about Merlin energy and the trickster energy and he's just beautiful. When you listen to him, you go, oh, I like that guy. And he's a heavy-duty dowser who's getting a lot of his download of information about about many things from the rods. we're a little bit jaded, or we don't think that could be anything. It's like, pyramids on your head or something. Or maybe they're good too. I don't know. But those rods are amazing when you allow yourself to just hold them gently, let them move, not by your force, but by whatever's coming into you from, the universe. You can pick up all kinds of accurate information that you discover afterwards. You check it out, and that was the goods. And so my friend who came in from 90 miles or minutes away, he leads his life by those rods, and he does some healing work with them as well. He tries to and effectively, can use this universal energy to point it or steer it or what have you to good effect, to make effects, to get answers, to make effects. It's a whole art form that we're not very conversant with it here in the States, but in England it's just taken for granted that that's one of the really useful, valuable tools. And was there more to that question than the dowsing rods? I think there was something you were asking before that.
Well, enhanced meditation if you're in a crop circle. Can you maybe talk about that?
Well, people, again, feel like they have, lovely, profound experiences of, people are sensitive in different ways. Some people are tremendously sensitive to the energy of a crop circle in all kinds of ways as I told you, sometimes they can't even get into it. It's just too hot to handle, and they back off, and they don't even go in. And other people have all kinds of physical effects that say to them, yes, I'm in the real deal here. I'm feeling it all over. And other people, like I'm a pretty mental person. I'm not so plugged into my bodily sensation, so to speak. So my mind goes crazy. I'm in awe when I walk into a really good, real crop circle. It's like, who could have done this? How did this happen? My mind just explodes. It opens. It's like, I want to be more and know more, and thank you for this confirmation that that this universe is so magical and so wonderful. But other people have real body stuff that goes on, and as I said, there's a little bit of healing that goes on for some people in them. You're really dealing with a very, very hot energy that can do all kinds of things. And people who meditate in the circles, which is not my specialty really, but others, I listen to other people, and they feel like there's very profound experiences. You're in a heightened field, and this is not nothing. This is, quite something. You're playing with the forces of the universe.
Yeah, you are, and I wonder what sun gazing would feel like if you were standing in a crop circle and stared at the sun. I'm sure it would enhance the experience and feel somewhat different. Maybe we should inspire people to do that. Looking at the sun will not hurt your vision. I've been looking at the sun all summer long, even at high noon as I'm walking down the street. I'm a living example. I've been doing it since April, and I'm a living example that sun gazing does not hurt your vision. We've been lied to about that one. It's funny, my mother is an ophthalmologist, and she refuses to acknowledge it, yet her son is a living example.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah, she's been brainwashed by
the You're
medical
getting me news here. You see, I'm learning something. This is good.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we don't have time to discuss any further subjects, so I guess I'll bring the show to a close, and I'll bring it to a close by telling you the same thing I tell all my guests. Loved having you on, and I'm sure if I wanted to, I could do a second show all about crop circles, but one of my goals with this show is to try to get as many different people on as possible before giving the same guest double dips. So don't feel bad if you don't hear another call from me to appear on my show again. That's only because I need to give a lot of other fascinating individuals a chance at some glory on my show. But believe me, this was a very informative show, and I'll make sure that this gets on YouTube for the world to hear. But I loved having you on.
I especially want people to get on my mailing list because I hear about TED there also, and that's really quite hot. The crop circles are a little bit passive now. You know, there's nothing especially new in that beautiful category, but TED can move the world right now. The dealing with the difficulties with TED can bring us to a place where we're really paying attention to things that we need to pay attention to way beyond TED. It isn't just about TED, but TED's the kind of doorway to get us thinking about how they're repressing things, which corresponds to how a lot of repression is going on in the world. And there's a lot of energy now in doing something about that. So if people will get on cropcirclemovie.com to not only see the trailer and see something about the movie, but also get on my mailing list, that would be quite wonderful.
I'm glad you got that info out. So I guess without further ado, I will bid you good day, and I wish you luck on your endeavors exploring the crop circle mystery and consciousness in general.
Well,
Take
thank
care,
you, Andrew.
Suzanne.
I've enjoyed it.
I enjoyed it too. Take care. Well, folks, next week I will be having Evie Lorgan on the show. She was supposed to be a guest on an earlier show but had to cancel due to a conference she was going, but she does want to come on, so we'll be talking about lots of stuff about how malevolent entities, not just greys and reptilians, but other malevolent entities affect people in many different ways. You may not know how your partner, your soulmate, is being affected by malevolent entities in some way, and they're sucking energy out of you. Evie Lorgan did talk about that in her Free Your Mind conference presentation at the Philadelphia 2013 Free Your Mind conference. You can see that on YouTube. There's also a 3-hour interview with George Kavasilis that she did on Super Woo Radio. I do plan on listening to that before having the show next week so I can plan what I'm going to say about the malevolent alien agenda and what she knows about it. So Evie Lorgan on next Wednesday. Wish me luck at the Liberty Political Action Conference. Wish me luck and everybody else who's going to be there the next 3 days. If I get a chance to confront Ron Paul, I'll ask him about voter fraud, but I don't expect him to actually say anything other than no comment. So without further ado, namaste, everybody. Enjoy your trek throughout consciousness.